Welcome back to the Queer Money follow-up series, episode 37. Look who we have back with us today.
Off from the couch.
David is still in back pain, but has enough energy to be able to come over here and at least participate a little bit. So our question to you today is, do you know your inherent superpower as a gay man? One, did you know that we all have superpowers? And two, do you know what your inherent superpower is as a gay man? Well, on episode 37 of the Queer Money podcast, we talked to Renaissance man, Emil Wilbekin. He is the former editor-in-chief of Vibe Magazine and editor-at-large at Essence Magazines. And while that's interesting enough, his whole entire story is very interesting. And that's what we talked about on this particular episode. And we didn't really talk about on this episode about Emil's superpower. But he's shared a couple of quotes that really inspired us and actually has stuck with us for quite some time. So Emil is a black gay man from Ohio who went to Columbia to get his journalism degree, and through a circuitous path of events, went to Paris, came back, and got into journalism and ended up working for... getting hired at Vibe Magazine. He was one of the inaugural employees at Vibe Magazine. And what was interesting, if you don't recall, Vibe Magazine was a hip-hop magazine back in the day, and I'm not necessarily sure if it's still around. But it was a hip-hop magazine back in the day, and it was founded in New York City. And, so Emil was working with Jay-Z and Lenny Kravitz and some of these really big heavy hitters in the music industry. And what made his story very compelling and unique was all along throughout his entire career there, he was an out gay man. Everybody knew that he was gay. He had a boyfriend for most of that time, and his boyfriend would come to various work and social events. And so it was very out and open. And so we talked about how he felt when he found he got the job as the editor-in-chief at Vibe Magazine after having worked there as in the underling ranks for a couple of years. And we specifically asked him, how did you feel about the fact that here you were gonna have such a prominent position in such an industry that's not necessarily accepting of LGBTQ people?
Well, I think especially back then, you think about the hyper masculinity, hyper misogynistic music that was coming out of predominantly R&B and rap music during the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. There was a lot of very aggressive, demeaning music coming out of that, out during that time period, especially of women, but also anyone who wasn't hyper masculine. So I think there probably was a lot of fear. I think even today, it's pretty clear the reason why there is such a huge down low culture in the African American community is because still there is this consensus among the African American community and others who are also a part of the rap music culture who are not okay with homosexuality and have spoken out against it quite verbally, even as recently as the last election cycle.
Yeah, exactly. There's still a challenge that the LGBTQ community has to face. And so when we asked Emil about the actual moment when he got the phone call that he was going to get this job, how did he feel about that, especially as it related to him being an out gay man? And he said, it was one of those moments where I realized that I had to live my truth and I had to be authentic. And I was definitely going to push boundaries and be out and gay and kind of just see what happens. And that's what I did. And this, to me, it really inspired me because here I thought about this boy coming from Ohio, going to Columbia in New York, getting a journalism degree, kind of sort of breaking out of the small town vibe, charting his own path in New York City, and then kind of getting swept up in the magazine industry as well as the sub industry of hip hop magazines, still being able to hold on to his truth. And he said it was something that he had to navigate. It was something that he had to be conscious of throughout his entire career. And to me, that's what the superpower that I think LGBTQ people, including gay men, have, is that we've had to, if we've succeeded to any degree, and I would define succeeding as making it to adulthood, not necessarily even, becoming a CEO or the founder of some amazing company, or becoming a celebrity in some shape or form, but just surviving to adulthood. I think we've all had to figure out, how do we navigate this unaccepting world that we live in? But I think what's great about the fact that we've all sort of been able to, or so many of us have been able to get to this particular point in our life, is that we can actually use that experience and apply that to other facets of our life. And so it doesn't mean that we just need to survive, because for us, surviving has meant so much more. What I think we can use that for, and what I think a lot of us forget that we can use that for, is that we can use that experience that we all go through as information, as motivation for us to become and do so much more. Being out and gay, it doesn't have to be our entire story. Right. There is so much more that we can do, and being out and gay doesn't have to limit our story. I've thought about, we do get some emails and some direct messages sometimes from folks who say, can I ever be successful as a gay man? And, I think very often we get stuck in telling ourselves these stories that, well, because I'm gay, I have these limiting beliefs. I can't do this, I can't do that. Or the myriad of reasons why we feel like we can't do something. But not only have we survived to adulthood, many of us, but then we have to think about, who are all the out gay successful men out there. You've got Tim Cook from Apple. You've got John Hall from Linux. You've got Chris Hughes, the co-founder of Facebook. You can name any number of out celebrities.
Right.
And if the thing is if you're able to get to adulthood as an out gay person, and you look at all around us, all these individuals, examples of people who are successful as out gay men, including Emil Wilbekin, that same opportunity is definitely available to us.
Well, it kind of reminds me, we just interviewed Patricia Redhawk, who is a very successful real estate investor, and she's a lesbian, presents very masculine. And one of the things that she wrote in a book that she wrote a chapter on was that she learned how to gain confidence by taking risks. And when you think about it, one of the most sexy traits in someone is confidence, right? When someone, true confidence, not that overt, like carrying yourself as you're bigger than everyone else, but someone who has that strong, quiet confidence, many of us will say, ooh, that's a sexy characteristic. I really love that. Well, they don't get that just because they're born. That is a trait, that is a characteristic that is learned through what she explained, and that was taking risks over and over and over and over again. So if we want that kind of confidence, we want that kind of success, we have to be willing to take risks. Because if you don't take the risks and you shy away from them all the time, you don't know what your capabilities are. Confidence comes from knowing what your capabilities are. It's so funny, sometimes you'll see some of the least likely people walk up to the hottest man in the gay bar and start having a conversation with them.
That's what I did.
Or they will ask this person out. And why is it that they can do that? It's because they have that confidence in themselves. They know how to carry on a conversation. They know how to walk up to somebody and not feel intimidated by them. As queer people in the business world, in the social world, we can develop that level of confidence just like everyone else can.
Well, and I would argue, just by virtue of being gay in this world at this time and place, that's already a risk. It's not necessarily one we took electively, but it's just a risk that's ever present. And if we can survive to adulthood to any degree, however you want to define success, even just getting to adulthood, I don't want to put too much pressure on anybody. Even just getting to adulthood and surviving, I think you've already shown that we've already shown that we can succeed at a degree of risk. Yeah. So use that as fuel and motivation. Figure out, okay, what can I do next? There certainly isn't, I think we've talked a lot about limiting beliefs on this series, and and all the challenges that many of us in our community have. But I think we can look to the Tim Cooks and the Emil Wilbekins as motivation and inspiration for what we can be in life. But I think we can often look to ourselves,
Right.
because we've shown ourselves that we're successful. And to me, that's what that inherent superpower is that gay men have, that I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for.
Well, I think that we talked about this on the very first episode of the Queer Money Follows when we were talking about coming out at work, right? And coming out at work and being out in the workplace, a lot of employers are now looking for individuals who have that kind of confidence to be themselves at work. And coming out is a very big step for folks. And learn from that. Learn from that, your coming out story. Learn from what it is that you're doing, those risks that you're taking every day in your life that allows you to become more comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Emil, you just made a point that Emil kind of made, that this doesn't necessarily mean that owning your inherent superpower is easy or taking those risks are easy. But Emil, had this great quote. He said, "It's not about being comfortable. It's about the discomfort and finding your way through that discomfort." And, that was his particular experience, becoming and then being the managing or editor-in-chief at Vibe Magazine. He had to break through that discomfort. But when he was able to navigate and find his way through that discomfort, that then, teed him up for success. Whereas a lot of people might have said, I'm not comfortable doing that. I'm not sure I can succeed with that. Richard Branson is famous for saying, when somebody presents to you an opportunity, say yes and figure out how later. And I think that's, to a certain degree, that's kind of what Emil did. He did talk about how at one point, when he started in college, he dreamt of becoming an editor-in-chief of his own magazine, and that this was somewhat close to that particular experience. But even when we're presented with the opportunity of what our dream is, how many stories have we watched where someone's finally presented with their dream and they kind of can't, for whatever reason, make it happen? They kind of decide to cower or chicken out, or whatever. I'm probably not using the right words, but for whatever reason, just can't seem to execute on that. And so, Emil, I think, is an inspiration. All of us who reach to adulthood are somewhat inspirations to ourselves, that we've been able to find our way through the discomfort to make the most of ourselves, and that, I think, can continue even beyond coming out of the closet, even beyond reaching to age 18 or 21. We can carry that through our whole life and get so much more out of our lives than we maybe are giving ourselves credit for.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us for another Queer Money follow-up. Here is your Queer Money follow-up takeaway from this particular episode. Please go to debtfreeguys.com/5BBHGL and get your free copy of the 5 building blocks of a happy gay life. This is a new passion project of mine and David's, and we want to spread this to as many people far and wide as possible. Then let us know in the conversations below whether you know what your superpower is. We'd love to hear what all of your superpowers are. And then join us tomorrow. We're going to do episode 38 of the Queer Money follow-up series, where we cover Queer Money podcast episode number 38, and we talk about how to protect your family financially with Dr. Janelle. And then lastly, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and set notifications on this channel so that you know when these Queer Money follow-ups go live and you can join in on the conversation. Thank you very much, and we will see you tomorrow.